Welcome to the online education portal for the postgraduate diploma in environment and occupational health. Today we will go for the water pollution. What is water pollution? This is very important terminology nowadays concerned with the pollutants. Now starting with the potable water. What is potable water? Potable water is mainly known as drinking water, which comes from the surface and the groundwater sources, and it is treated to the levels that most standards for the consumption. More than 2 billion people who lack the potable water at home, 263 millions, they must travel to 30 minutes per trip to collect this potable water. So, how scarcity we are having for this potable water or the drinking water in our surroundings. Why this water is so important? Because it is the essential to all animal and plant life on the earth. Plants, for example, use water in photosynthesis to make their food, and on an approximate 60% of the adult human body is made up of water, and it performs all functions including the dissolving water nutrients in the bloodstream and delivering them to cells, regulating our body temperature, dissolving waste substances and carrying them out of body in urine, feces and sweat. It also helps in protecting the tissues, joints and the spinal cords. Where is earth water? It has been seen that on an approximate 96.5% of the water is present in the oceans, whereas 0.9% is as saline water. Only 2.5% is present as fresh water. Out of this 2.5 fresh water, 68.7% came from the glaciers and ice caps, and 30.1% came from the groundwater, and it occupies only 1.2% as the other fresh water or the surface water. And from this surface fresh water, it includes 69% of the ground ice and permafrost, 20.9% is constituted by lakes, and this is the total surface water and other fresh water, and 3% is in the atmosphere. Out of this, living things takes 0.6%, rivers contributes 0.49%, swamps and marshes they contribute 2.6%, and soil moisture is 3.8%. So, we come to the point, then what are the water quality indicators? The water quality indicators are 4. Number 1 is the physical indicator, number 2 is the chemical indicator, number 3 is the biological indicator, and number 4 is the radiological indicator. All these indicators, they determine the type of quality of water. Now we will do first physical indicator. What are these physical indicators? Physical indicator mainly involves the temperature, turbidity, electrical conductivity, viscosity, pH. All these comes under the physical indicator. Number 2 is the chemical indicators. It involves the metals, salts, nitrates, phytoplanktons, your pesticides, all dissolved oxygen, phosphorus, nitrogen content, they involve the chemical indicators. Number 3 is the biological indicator. It mainly involves the bacteria, parasite, viruses, protozoa. Number 4 is the radiological indicators. It involves the radioactive elements, for example, uranium, etc. Now comes to the what is water pollution. Water pollution is the undesirable changes in the water bodies. Now, which water bodies? All the water bodies. Undesirable changes has been by means of the toxic substances when they have been contaminated to the water bodies, for example, lakes, rivers, oceans and so on. They get dissolved in the water and contaminate the quality of water. Water bodies can be polluted by a wide variety of the substances, mainly included pathogenic microorganism, perishable organic waste, plant nutrients, toxic chemicals, sediments, heat, petroleum, radioactive substances. Water pollution mainly involves the release of substances into the subsurface groundwater or into lakes, streams, rivers, estuaries and oceans to the point where the substances interfere with beneficial use of the water or with the natural functioning of ecosystem. In addition to these, the release of substances such as chemicals or microorganisms, water pollution may also include the release of energy in the form of radioactivity or heat into bodies of water. Now, how many types of water pollution is there? There are mainly three types of the water pollution. First is the toxic, number 2 is the organic, number 3 is the thermal. So, number 4 is the ecological. First we will go for the toxic. These are the toxic substances which contributes a lot to the toxic pollution, and it involves mainly herbicides, pesticides and the industrial compounds. The second type is the organic pollution. It involves the organic substances which contains the excess of organic matter such as your sewage, manures which enters the water. Third is the thermal pollution. It can occur when water is used as a coolant near a power or industrial plant and then in return to the aquatic environment at a higher temperature than it was originally. Number 4th is the ecological pollution. It takes place when chemical pollution, organic pollution or thermal pollutions are caused by nature rather than by human activity. So, in total we have 4 kinds of the type of water pollution. Number 1 is the toxic pollution, number 2 is the organic pollution, number 3 is the thermal pollution and number 4 is the ecological pollution. Now, all these they come from these are the sources. First one is the surface water pollution. It mainly contributes to the depletion of the oxygen. Groundwater, it depletes the nutrients. Microbiological, it contaminates the suspended matter and the chemicals. The surface water pollution, it mainly involves or come by the contact of hazardous material with the surface water dissolution or physical mixing with water, and it is known as surface water pollution. Now, what are the sources of this surface water pollution? There are mainly 2 sources of the surface water pollution. Number 1 is the point source pollution and number 2 is the non-point surface pollution. So, in this surface water pollution mainly it has been categorized into 2 classes, point and non-point. Now, what are non-point source pollution? The non-point source pollution mainly includes your industries, the pollutant which are coming from the industries, the pollutant which are coming from the livestock, the pollutant which are coming from the rural homes, the pollutant which are coming from the suburban development or from the runoff from city streets and the parking lots. So, these are the non-point sources of the pollution. Now comes to the point sources. Now, the point sources mainly involves the pipe or any nalas or a specific place. It involves the point sources. Now, what are the sources of these point sources and the non-point sources? We will categorize into, first we will go for point sources. So, the point sources, they are located at a specific place and they are very much easy to identify and monitor and to regulate the point sources. For example, drain pipes, they can be managed very easily. Factories, the effluent which is coming from a particular factory, that can be monitored in a very perfect manner. Sewage treatment, that comes from a particular house or a particular society. Underground mines, these are the few sources of the point sources. Now comes to the non-point sources. Non-point sources includes the broad and the diffuse areas. It is very much difficult to identify and to manage because it is in the area which it include, it is very large and we cannot manage, and it is very much expensive to clean up of also. For example, runoff of the croplands, urban streets, your parking lots, these are the few we can say sources of the non-point sources. Next is the nutrient pollution. This is the pollution which can be from the human health or from it is a ecological problem where septic systems are placed near drinking water wells or nutrient sensitive surface water. In the aerated soil beneath the drain fields, nitrogen, the wastewater is nitrified to nitrate which moves readily through the soils. It also involves the nutrient pollution. The third very important is the eutrophication terminology. In under eutrophication, what is happening? This is also a nutrient. This is a very good example of the nutrient pollution because it has a huge amount of the harmful algal blooms, dead zones, and the fish are killed as a result of the eutrophication, and it begins with the increased load of nutrients to estuaries, coastal waters, and to the lakes. So, eutrophication is mainly basically a set of a chain reaction in the ecosystem starting with an overabundance of algae and plants. The excess algae and plant matter eventually decompose producing the carbon dioxide. The second very important is the example of this the ocean acidification. It lowers the pH seawater, and in this the acidification slows down the growth of the fish and shellfish and can prevent the shell formation in bivalve molluscs. This leads to a reduced catch for commercial and recreational fisheries. So, this the human causes the main factor which is responsible for the eutrophication, agriculture, fertilizer, they are the human beings, because human beings they send a lot of sewage waste from the agricultural and livestock runoff, residential runoff, septic runoff. So, these are the few sources for the eutrophication and agricultural fertilizers. Excess of the nutrients, they have a very high impact on the water system because it will change the species composition, it changes the food due to the light limitations, it causes the undesired growth of the algae and results into the excess of organic carbon, dissolved oxygen deficiency happen to takes place, and toxin production takes place in the water bodies, and this is a very big threat to the human health because of disinfection of the near water body. All these are the you can say due to the eutrophication and all this, there is a disease happen to takes place that is known as hypoxia. It is a result of a decrease in the soluble oxygen concentration of the oceanic water, and a new data of the dead zones are increasing in both the number and sizes. Now comes to the groundwater pollution. Groundwater pollution mainly happen to takes place due to the geogenic and this on-site sanitation systems. Fertilizer and pesticides are also one of the main source for the groundwater pollution. Sewage, commercial and industrial leaks, hydraulic fracturing, landfill leachates, these are the sources of the groundwater pollution. Microbiological pollution involves the many organisms which are residing in the water, and they causes the diseases for land animals, fish and humans. Microorganisms, which includes bacteria, viruses and protozoas, they cause very serious illness such as chlorella are caused by due to the microorganisms existing in the water. These diseases mainly damage the people who live in the poorer countries as they do not have access to treated the water like India. So, for the groundwater pollution, mainly the pollution, groundwater pollution and the microbiological pollution happen to take place due to the groundwater contamination occur due to the number of causes. Number one is the on-site sanitation system, fertilizer, pesticides, sewage, commercial and industrial leaks, hydraulic fracturing, landfill leachates. Whereas the microbiological pollution happen to take place due to microorganisms and which causes disease to animals, fish and humans. Microorganisms includes bacteria, viruses, protozoa. Some dangerous illness such as chlorella are caused by the microorganisms existing in the water, and these diseases typically damage the people who live in poorer countries. Besides this, there are the types and sources of the pollutants are the pathogens, organic matter, organic chemicals, inorganic chemicals, heavy metals and physical agents. Whereas the agents and the major sources for these different types of the pollutants, for example, first we will take pathogens. In this, the main agents are the bacteria, viruses, protozoa and parasitic worms, whereas the sources are the non-point sources, for example sewage, livestock, poultry farms, sewage from overburdened wastewater treatment plants. Number 2 is type of the pollutant is the organic matter, where the agents are animal and plant matter remains, and the sources are non-point sources. Organic chemicals, it involves the agents pesticides, fertilizers, plastics, detergents, gasoline, oil and other materials which are coming from the petroleum, whereas the sources are the non-point sources such as lawns, farms, golf courses, roads, wastewater, etc. Inorganic type of the pollutants, it involves the agents acids, bases, salts and industrial chemicals, and the sources are point as well as non-point sources. The fourth type of the pollutant is heavy metal. It includes agents lead, mercury, cadmium and arsenic, and the major sources of this are the point and non-point sources. Physical agents is another type of the pollutants. It includes the agents of heat and suspended solid. Point sources and non-point sources are the major sources of this. Besides these, how we get contaminated and get into our water supply. The main contamination of the water into the water supply, it comes from the waste from the manufacturing plants, rain coming through the air pollution, that is acid rain, runoff from agricultural pesticides, gasoline leaks are another source, animal waste and dead animals are another source, drugs flushed into water supply, sewage and waste runoff, these are the main sources which contaminates the water supplies, because they enter into the aquifers and from the aquifers they come contact into the water table, results into the contamination to the water supply. Besides this contamination, what else is in your water? When we talk of the groundwater contamination in the Delhi district, it is very high salinity, electrical conductivity in New Delhi. Fluorides is above 1.5 milligram per liter, nitrates are above 45 milligram per liter, arsenic is more than 0.01 milligram per liter. So this is the status of the daily water supply, which is very high, and we must take under consideration these data for different organic and inorganic components. Now the India is under water crisis because 70% of the Indian water is contaminated, 75% of the households do not have the drinking water on the premises, and 84% of the rural households do not have access to piped water. So what will happen with such, what will happen to the water quality which is contaminated with such an high you can say contamination in the water bodies? Now the pollutants of the poverty. The pollutants of the poverty involves the sanitation related bacteria, trash and litter in waterways, where the 80% of the world wastewater is released to the environment without treatment. Second aspect is the pollutant of growing prosperity, which involves the chemical and waste from industry, agricultural, fertilizer and pesticide, where the use of nitrogen as a fertilizer has increased by more than 700% since 1960, which nearly all of that growth occurring in Asia. Third is the emerging pollutant, which involves the micro and nanoplastic pharmaceutical drugs. The microplastics have proliferated throughout the world freshwater sources in surface water, groundwater and even the rainwater. So this is the data how the pollution has made the water so contaminated. One of the British poet W.H. Auden, he noticed and he said that thousands have lived without love, not one without water. Yet while we all know water is crucial for life, we trash it anyway. Some 80% of the world wastewater is dumped largely untreated back into the environment, which is polluting the rivers, lakes and the oceans. So sewage wastewater is another name for wastewater from domestic industrial processes. Despite strict regulations control, the Environment Agency data shows that the water and the sewage industry both have accounted for almost a quarter of the serious water incident in industrial wastewater. This is also another you can say toxic waste which has been laden with pollutants. Some of these pollutants are released into the environment as air pollution, others are drained into the fresh water that introduced into the canals, rivers and then to the sea. Some of the most common chemicals are lead, sulfur, mercury, asbestos and nitrates. These chemicals can change the water color and temperature. They also cause eutrophication, which is increase in the mineral content of the water, and these chemicals they are very much hazardous to the local flora and fauna, including fishes and the small phytoplanktons and the zooplanktons. Another very important component is the fossil fuel, where the burning of the fossil fuels such as coal, oil produces a huge amount of the ash that is released into the environment, and the particles which are released into the environment are very much toxic when they become mixed with water vapor in the environment. They in the clouds they cause acid rain. Additionally, the fossil fuels they are also giving you carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxide which is released, and it is a great contributor to the global warming. Besides all these, we have fertilizer and pesticides are also, these are the chemical products which has been utilized by the farmers to protect their crops, and they are beneficial for the plants because they protect against the insects and harmful bacteria. But unfortunately, these chemicals they are mixed with the rainwater and they become a problem as they flow off the land into streams, rivers and canals. They are harmful to both animal and the human beings as well as plant life. Eventually, they will make their way to water sources which damage the aquatic life. Now, we will study the impact of water pollution. What are the impacts of the water pollution? We will study the impacts of all the countries which are rich and the poor. So, by this water pollution, the main important thing that is coming up is to determine the total economic cost of the bad water quality. It all depends upon the three factors. Number one is the biological oxygen demand, number two is the oxidized nitrogen, and number three is the salinity. So, biological oxygen demand, it is well known that polluted water harms the economies, and previously it is unknown that where BOD is high, GDP growth is lowered by 1/3. This is the biggest thing which come out through the impact of water pollution through the biological oxygen demand. The second very important is the well known that nitrates are lethal for babies, and previously it was unknown that nitrates increase childhood stunning by 11 to 19% and decrease adult earning by 1 to 2%. So, this is another very important aspect which affect the GDP growth. Number three is the well known that salts degrade land, that is salinity. Previously, it is unknown that enough food is lost each year because of saline water to feed 170 million people, equivalent to a country the size of Bangladesh. So, how this impact of water pollution we can see via biological oxygen demand, oxidized nitrogen and the nitrogen, how it is depleting the you can say the food, your childhood, and number three is the economy of the country. The developing countries they are facing outbreaks of waterborne diseases like cholera, dysentery, diarrhea and typhoid because of poor drinking water. Groundwater contaminated with pesticides and fertilizers from the farmlands can lead to problems of reproductive and the endocrine systems in the human beings. Besides this, we can say bluntly that water pollution kills all an approximate 1.8 million deaths in 2015, and according to a study published in the Lancet that contaminated water can make you ill every year. Unsafe water sickens about 1 billion people. and in the low income countries or the communities, they are disproportionately at risk because their homes are often closest to the most polluting industries. The waterborne pathogens in the form of disease causes bacteria and viruses from human and animal waste are the major cause of illness from contaminated drinking water. Diseases spread by unsafe water includes mainly cholera, giardia and typhoid. These are the main, you can say, waterborne diseases, and in the wealthy nations or the developed countries, the accidental or illegal release from sewage treatment facilities as well as runoff from the farms or the agricultural areas and urban areas contribute harmful pathogen to waterways. Death of the aquatic animal, disruption of food chain, diseases, destruction of ecosystems and contamination of the drinking water. These are the you can say effects of the water pollution. The 6 very terrible effects which we involves, they are the pesticides, your sewage, arsenic, salt, lead and the nutrients. These are the main sources to affect the water pollution. More pesticides, more will be the diseases. More nutrients, more will be the diseases in the water bodies. More sewage wastewater generation, more diseases will be there. Arsenic, salt and lead, they are also the more contaminated chemicals in the water polluting bodies. As we all have heard the Minamata incident, this is a disease Minamata which is a neurological syndrome that results from the industrial pollution and the environmental contamination, and the causes of this Minamata disease is the methyl mercury, which is a byproduct of the manufacture of the acetaldehyde. It is discharged with the factory drainage, polluted fishes and shellfishes. People ate them in large quantity and then Minamata diseases broke out. It has been come from the Minamata city in 1932 in Japan, and what is happening? It started dumping its industrial effluent, that is methyl mercury, into the surrounding bay and the sea. This methyl mercury is incredibly toxic to humans and animals, like causing a wide range of neurological disorders, and this ill effect were not immediately noticeable by that time. However, with the changed as this all changed as methyl mercury had started to bioaccumulate inside the shellfish and fish in the Minamata Bay. These affected organisms were then caught and consumed by the local population, and as a result the ill effects of methyl mercury was becoming apparent. So, the diseases or the Minamata diseases, symptoms and signs were seen. Mental retardation happened to take place, micrography happened to take place, the restlessness has been come up, and there are few other diseases that have been come up with the Minamata. How can we prevent the water pollution? What are the ways by which we can prevent this water pollution? The number one, very important, that we can contribute to reduce your plastic consumption and reuse or recycle plastic when you can do. Number two is the proper disposal of the chemicals, cleaners, oils, non-biodegradable items to keep them from ending up down the drain. Maintain your car so it does not leak oil, antifreeze or the coolant. Last one, if you have a yard, considerably landscaping that reduces runoff, and avoid applying pesticides and herbicides into the agriculture or in your yard. This is all about how we can prevent, and as we all know that every year more than 8 lakh people around the world die from the waterborne diseases. And how this water pollution in India that kills the millions of the people because of the contaminated, the water is not drinkable, it is contaminated by number of organisms, number of pollutants. On an approximate in India, more than 1.2 billion people only 30% of its population lives on less than $1.25 a day. Around 80% of the India water is severely polluted because people dump their raw sewage, silt, garbage into the rivers and the lakes. Each year, 1.5 million Indian children die from the diarrhea. Out of the entire Indian population, experts predict that 40% of the people may not have the connection to clean water source by 2030. So, in overall, 351 polluted river stretches in India, a list across the study, and microplastic concentration in Ganga more than any other major world river. This has been given by a new study, and choking the Mahananda is another study which has been come up from the Siliguri waste and water crisis turning on its people. So, this is all about this how the different sources they are contaminating the water. Besides all this, we can go for the wetlands also, because wetlands are also very important and they can be cleaned by human hair and many other. 5 innovations were given by the Indians that curb the water pollution, that is turning the sewage water into the drinkable water. What they do, the organic water filters they developed by Anta P. Bizu, one of the fellow, and the Thomas Sirek is another fellow who, by taking the size of an index finger, cost ₹10 and can convert up to 10 liter of the impure water into the pure water or the drinkable water. So, this is very great, you can say, achievement which is being taken up by these two fellows, Anto P. Bizu and the Thomas Sirek. And another very important study which was being done by in the floating wetlands to make water bodies pollutant free, the Tarun Sebastian Nanda, an ecological engineer, he is using a natural way to clean water bodies in Delhi through his Adopt an Island initiative. Third, purification of water is being done by the you can say Anjan Mukherjee, a former marine chief engineer, has developed the disinfection reactor, and he developed a design and installed inside a hand pump or motorized borewell, and it will purify the contaminated water within 30 minutes by killing 99% of the microbes present in it. Another treatment which was being done with the treatment with the water with the human hair, this is the Nikhilesh Das from the Assam, this fellow, he came up with an indigenous way to use human hair to clean oil spills in water. He mixed motor oil and lubricant with water in a beaker. As the oil formed a layer on top, he deposited human hair and saw how it absorbed 90% of the oil from the water. And another very important factor which clear the water is using artificial intelligence and robotics to solve the water woes. This has been done by the Asim Blaro and Nidhi Jain, have been instrumental in delivering 600 mld million liter day of raw sewage from entering water bodies and prevented over 5,600 hours of manual sequencing. Thank you.